Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I'm delighted this afternoon to be joined by Patrick McGilp. We are hoping that Big Yogi joins us, Patrick, but unfortunately we couldn't see him. And we both said to him, they want to see you, John. They want to see the big man. Therefore, go and sort your camera out and come back. Hopefully, you can do that. And it will be the trio. We're going to be talking all things Celtic for the next hour. Get involved in the chat. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel, give us a big thumbs up and all of that jazz, all the good stuff. Patrick, you looking forward to tomorrow night?
I am. I am. Europe is, I think, where a lot of our excitement comes from in this part of the season. You've obviously you're playing in four competitions in the first half of the year. The league, that's your bread and butter. You're sort of getting on with that every sort of Saturday and Sunday. But during the week, you're playing in cup competitions. You're playing in European football, and I think it's what we all look forward to as Celtic fans, trying to push the envelope and just see how far we can take ourselves. Obviously, I think that's where a lot of the anger has came from this season. The fact that I think the fans have higher expectations than certain folk running the club. But I'm still hopeful. I think we've got a half decent squad. I think we can go on a half decent run in Europe. I think we're certainly struggling to put away chances. But at the weekend there, I thought we were a lot better at creating chances, and I think we've been fairly solid defensively this season. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow night. I'm sure we'll go into the sort of detail of it, but Braga, I think they got off to a pretty good start against Feyenoord, which I think, it's an interesting result for us that Braga beating Feyenoord because we have to play both of those sides. The game was in Portugal, so that's maybe in Braga's favour. But then, of course, Braga go and lose. I think they lost 1-0 to Nacional on Sunday night there, which I think are, they're not a very good Portuguese side, Nacional. So it was a bit of a shock result. So it's set up quite nicely. I think we're the bookies' favourites. I'd like to think that we are favourites. I think if we can start putting the ball in the back of the net, I think it could end up being a brilliant result for us, a good win, and get us our first one on the board in the Europa League. Is only 4 points, and hopefully then we can sort of kick on this season because as much as protests are still required, and I'm sure we'll talk about the protests. I think in terms of football and supporting the team, I think we're getting to a stage where we really do need to kick on if we're going to have a successful season. It is now October, so footballing wise, we need to start flowing. The team and the fans need to have an element of unity. But obviously on a sort of macro level, on a bigger level, we all still want change, and I think we all still require change if we are to then push the envelope in Europe and continue to progress forward as a club.
John, this man talks far too much sense, doesn't he? Patrick McGill talks far too much sense. You're right, though. You're absolutely right. We can't ignore what's going on, John, but it's always great to focus as much as we can on the football as well. But with the caveat that, with one eye on everything that's going on in and around the club. I was sent a really good wee video, actually, from Steve-O from the Celtic World Order. Stevie's been on the show a couple of times on This Is Acsom. He's going to join me again. And it put me in mind a wee bit of some of the feelings I was having when I was going my wander around Paradise. And I was looking at some things and thinking the club really need to put that right, just structural stuff and aesthetic stuff, John. So I've got a wee video I'm going to play about halfway into the show as well in relation to that, because it's one of my big bugbears, the development of the stadium. But let's talk football for a moment. I think Patrick makes a really good point there. The Hibs game is really frustrating, John. Very, very frustrating for a number of reasons, because we created so much chances, but we didn't have like a killer edge to our game, I don't think. We've lost a lot of goals and a lot of assists from the players that have left the football club, and Jota, who's sitting on the treatment table. Do you get a sense, John, like Patrick suggested there, that we might just get it right? It might just click. We might start, converting a higher percentage of these chances that we're creating.
I don't know about a sense, but certainly a hope. So, Hibs weren't particularly good at doing the things other people have been good at doing that you'd expect Braga to do, to force us down the wings, play a mid-block, happy to give up that space, deal with crosses. So, but Iheanacho is sort of frustrating. He's never been a prolific scorer, but he's never had this many chances either. So
yeah, absolutely.
He's worked in more difficult environments, generally speaking. So he's going to get plenty of chances, and you would hope that he starts to take them. there's a lot of very, very nice aspects to his play. You know, the way he holds things up, the way he links things, you know, it looks a lot more cohesive when he's there, because the ball's not just bouncing backwards. There was plenty to be hopeful for, you know, in terms of that game. There was plenty to look at, and you know, you can usually tell by the reaction. If it had been a dour 0-0, you know, we'd all be raging. But it was a dour 0-0 going on 5-0. You know, so it wasn't. There was lots of it that was just not good enough. But then there was plenty of it that's been much better than we've seen so far this year. And you have to latch on to those green shoots. You have to sort of hope that is the first signs really of progression. You know, we always say, and I forget, it's one of the oldest tropes, isn't it? That basically, if you're making chances and not taking them, that's a lot better than not making chances. You know, so I'm hopeful that we will get it right. We'll get a settled lineup. I mean, that was the first time I'd played on the right in quite a while. You know, and so everyone's sort of adapting to a slightly new environment. The midfield was new. So there are all these things. There was good and bad in all of it, and I'm sure we'll come to that. So I'm, you know, I'd be looking forward to it. And looking forward to. I mean, I'm not sure. You know, I don't know how much Patrick covered there because I was trying to reboot and couldn't hear him. But I mean, you know, Braga have disposed of the two European giants in Lincoln Red Imps and Cluj so far this year.
Both of the teams are beating us, John.
That's exactly my point. So, you know, they have a European pedigree which we are struggling to match. So, yeah, I look, you know, we'll come to the Braga game as well, but I would say, as I'm sure everyone has said probably this week, that I was happy with aspects of what I saw. I think it was a very disappointing outcome in the circumstances, but you know, we haven't really shown much this year at all to be, you know, to be latching on to in terms of hoping to see progression. So I think it's a good start.
Yeah, and when you came back in, you sent us both a wee private message. Can you see me now? Not quite, but you get the idea. Absolutely great to have you back on, John. Loads of good comments coming in, and I'm keen to bring as many of them up as possible. Obviously, there is going to be a silence. We'll be talking about that as well. And the launch of the Henrik range yesterday. I think the number 7 could be a pivotal number because obviously he's the number 7. They're punting us number 7 merch, and we've not had answers to the 7 questions. Jungle Lion, as often happens, is first up on the YouTube. Unfortunately, if the board haven't replied to the association's request by now, so highly unlikely they will wait till after the AGM at least. The collective, yeah, absolutely. They haven't responded. There's been no response from the club whatsoever. David Boyle, the board are going to do as they always do and provide radio silence. The issue is Tony Bloom is changing the landscape here, and standing still is regressing. Good point. The default success time is over. Default success, yeah, I was just saying this yesterday, 40 years ago, obviously, Love Street is the 40th anniversary of next year. You've got guys like Albert Kidd, who has become a Celtic legend without pulling on the hoops. Tosh McKinley was the man who went off for Kidd to come on for Dundee, and there were tears shed by the Jambos. They came second that year, way before your time, Patrick. But there is a chance that, I mean, I'm asking the question, I asked it yesterday and on Monday, could they come second again? And some people are saying to me, well, forget about second, they're challenging you guys for the league. Do you buy that? Do you buy that already, or is it too soon to say, Patrick?
I think they need to do make a few big moves this season in order to keep up their current form. I don't believe McInnes is the man that's going to, you know, win Hearts the league. He might get them second. That sort of depends on what happens with Russell Martin, to be honest. But I think to win the league, I think Hearts will need a different manager. And also, I think a bigger squad. I think they need to sign, you know, 3 or 4 guys of quality to add to their numbers in January. Which, you know, I wouldn't rule out Tony Bloom loaning them, you know, 3 or 4 half decent Brighton players to give them a real shot. But I don't think David McInnes is that man. I think he's more than capable of getting second. I think he's shown that, and I think that's probably, you know, Bloom's thinking in appointing him. that he's split Celtic and Rangers in the past, albeit it was the first 2 years that the new club out of Ibrox were in the league. But he has done it in the past, and he's obviously done well with Kilmarnock as well. I think they've got a really good shot at second. I think it's still very early to say for definite, but I think they've got a great shot for second. I just don't think that the squad is there for them to challenge us over the course of a season. Albeit we've made a pretty poor start, but I think we are beginning to click there. As John said, we are creating chances, even if we're not taking them. Defensively, I think we've been pretty good defensively all season, irrespective of everything else that's going on. So I think it is a bit too much for them. But it is, as you mentioned, it's a bit sort of funny and ironic that it is 40 years on from Love Street, their last sort of real title challenge. I think it was 2006, I want to say, they came second. The Paul Le Guen season. So that was a great achievement for them. But since they really challenged the title, it's been 40 years. So fair play. And I think that the second comment that you brought up there is absolutely spot on. Resting on our laurels, winning the league by default because other teams are all a mess. I think those days are probably long gone, or will be long gone pretty soon. That guy took over. Look what he done with Brighton, but then also look what he done with USG over in Belgium. They were a bit of a basket case only, I think, 10, 13 years ago or something. I think they finished top of the Belgian league before the three-way split. They then play playoff games in that sort of top four spot, and they'd lost out recently, but they ended up winning the Belgian league for the first time just in May there, USG. It's a weird. If you think our split is confusing, you should check out the Belgian league because they've somehow made it even more confusing.
Yeah, I noticed that remember Ronnie Dyla got binned, and then whoever came in ended up winning the league.
I think so. I think I do remember that because he was there. He was in that league for a while, but I think they've been performing really well basically since the end of the pandemic. USG, and they finally got over the line, and I think all the big clubs over there are quite happy because if you finish in the top four, you're guaranteed European football. So they're quite happy with the setup, and it's obviously been a big appeal for Tony Bloom. Get into Europe, Scottish football. Obviously, we've got a few places. If he can cement Hearts as at least third, if not second, if not competing for the league, then he can get that European football here as well. So he's a very shrewd operator. He's obviously done well elsewhere. So we need to buck up our ideas basically and how we run our football club. We need to be more progressive, more forward thinking, and resting on our laurels the way that we have been for the last 20 years, I don't think is enough. I also want to shout out, I meant to do it 10 minutes ago, Martin from the Livingston Emerald, who is a recent subscriber to Acsom, I think, if I remember correctly. Started watching this season because he was unhappy with how the club's going. I met him in the Tavern Bar in Parkhead at the game on Saturday. And Martin actually bought 500 shares in 2005 in the last share issue. And is obviously a big fan of the podcast, a big fan of everything you do, Paul John, and obviously is quite happy to see any sort of protest of any change that's coming because what happened earlier this season was unacceptable, and anyone can see that. So I wanted to shout out Martin. I met him on Saturday. I'm sure I'll meet him in the tavern again, but just wanted to say that. I think we do have to modernise. We do have to force change, or else guys like Tony Bloom, Hearts, I think they can provide a real challenge.
I just say, sorry, Paul John, there was a comment under, I can't remember whose video it was, basically saying, should we not keep the protests until after the January window to see whether they're actually needed? And you're just... that's the kind of thing that just takes my breath away. It's just like, do you think this is about the one window? That's what you think. You think this is about, that's what's united the entire Celtic support for the most part. You think it's one window that didn't quite go to plan. You think that's what the issue is. It's breathtaking to me how people are watching Celtic videos and commenting these things on them, and just like, what are you listening to? Is this your first video that you've watched? It's breathtaking. Some people just don't get it. And I would say about the protests as well, I don't think it's a particularly good idea, the silence ones. I'm a fan of more proactive protests if you're going to have them. However, if that's what's been agreed, then that's what's been agreed. And it's very much to me like back in the sort of union days, collective action means collective action. So, I don't think my opinion is more important than the opinions of all the people that have agreed these protests. And I would ask people who are against it whether they think their opinion is more important than the sort of what was a pretty much unified Celtic support. No, maybe you don't agree with it. I don't think it's a great idea, but I'd certainly back it. I still back it. And we have very little choice. And I would hope that the next step is something that's a lot more proactive.
See, the thing, John, there's a couple of points on that. I'm glad you brought it up. And also on Patrick's point, I hope clubs like Hearts and other clubs in Scotland get their act together. I really do, because I think it makes Celtic stronger. You can't continue to be complacent in anything you do if there's other clubs who have got that ambition and that drive and the forward thinking kind of motivation, and they bring in the entrepreneurial flair of people from outside the Scottish game with a new view and a new angle on things. Absolutely welcome it. And I think that's what Celtic need. We need a fit up the backside. We're not going to get it from Rangers at the moment because they're a basket case. If it's Hearts, last season for a spell I thought it might have been Aberdeen. If it's Hibs, absolutely bring it on. I welcome that. I mean, you look at the Scottish game that Yogi's dad played in, unbelievable level of talent. When you look at some of the clubs, I mean, it was a real achievement to win the Scottish division back then. It wasn't something that was a cakewalk. Have a look at the 9 in a row and see how tight it was at the top of the league. No one ever won the league by double figure points. It didn't happen. It was always a very tight run. I mean, in the season where we won everything, Dundee United beat us home and away. Dundee United beat the Lisbon Lions home and away that season. So yeah, I welcome it. But on your point, John, absolutely. We could speak to the people. Now, we get generally, if you want to look at the live comments and the comments after the live, we get about 1,000 all in. And we could run a poll today, John, or you could run a poll on your social media. And it might say, that's a bad idea. But the situation that the collective is in is that it's very much a fast-moving situation. Therefore, decisions have to be made. And I think, yeah, that'd be brilliant if you could throw it out to 60,000 people every time. But it's just not possible to make these decisions based on a voting process that goes out to the masses, like the survey that they initially did. So what they decided to do is set up a steering group whereby things are brought into the steering group and representation. You've got fan media, Celtic supporters clubs, the association, the affiliation, the Irish Association, the Ultras, the Trust. Loads and loads of representation in there. And as you say, John, if a decision is made, it's a democratic process. The three guys in here might not agree with it. There might be 1,000 people in the comments don't agree with it. But the process is right. The process is right. And I'm the same as yourself, John. I trust the process because I back what the collective are all about. We all want what's best for Celtic. I think the longer it's left, and we're looking at Braga tomorrow night, 29 minutes of silence for 29 days of board silence since the open letter. That's the significance of the 29. It's going to be tough. You go to the Celtic games, the emotion's running high. It's a European night. It is going to be tough. But I tell you what, in terms of uncomfortable for the players, this is a discussion we had yesterday. I also think it's going to be uncomfortable for the board because the board can't turn around and say, you're letting us down. You can't possibly say that to a Celtic fan who's in the stadium, but the board are certainly letting the fans down. I am going to play a 5 or 6 minute video from Steve-O to talk about the stadium. That's a slightly different subject, but we will talk about it. And also want to have a look at who should be starting the game. But before I do that, bringing Danielle up. Danielle is a friend of Acsom and comments on a regular basis on the YouTube channel. And you're spot on. I've got it on my list of things to discuss today, Danielle. Need to call out the scumbag posting vile stuff about our wee Jay Beattie. He's a wee superstar, and this scumbag posting vile stuff about him and to his family. Absolutely spot on, Danielle. Disgusting. You if you're on social media, you may have seen this.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I looked at that, and then I looked at the guy's profile. He's got like 58 followers. I don't think I'd be surprised if it's a real account, especially if you saw his picture. You know what I mean? Because his picture, you wouldn't put that picture up if that was your face. You know what I mean?
You would avoid it, John. Yeah, you would.
Especially not if you're giving people abuse. That's a fairly easy comeback. I'm not sure how genuine it is. It is vile, disgusting abuse, but I think someone's hiding behind, a 58 follower, profile they probably set up a month ago or whatever it is. But I don't think it's certainly not the person that's in the picture. I'd be astonished if that was the case. But I mean, the mindset though, and apparently, that profile has abused Jay before. So the mindset of someone who sets up a profile and then starts abusing a wee laddie with disabilities. I mean, the level of deranged scumbag that you need to be at that sort of nonsense. I mean, you should be in a cell, and I'd be pretty much guarantee a hard drive check would ensure you went to a cell.
There's a level of depravity, John. I mean, I do sometimes wonder, because we're in a world now where everybody's got a device in their pocket, and every single thought that they have, some people think that they should share it with the world. And you look at that. I've had the absolute pleasure of meeting Jay and his dad Martin a couple of times over the years, and to have a thought in your mind to even think that way in that vile manner, Patrick, but to then type it out and think, I'm posting this. Unbelievable. I don't understand the level of hatred and depravity that you have and you see on social media on a regular basis. But targeting Jay is shocking, needs to be called out. This is the kind of thing that I think you need to take a hard line on it. I think in terms of getting the authorities involved, you need to protect people. You need to protect people, because it's completely unacceptable, isn't it, Patrick?
And unfortunately, social media, I think, it can be a great tool, but it brings out the worst in so many people. I mean, this guy, I've not actually seen this. This is the first I've heard of this, so I don't know what was said. But from what John was saying, it's a fake account created recently. It's got a fake profile picture. It's totally anonymous, and the guy or girl, whoever it is. I mean, they're obviously a sick individual. I mean, what possesses you to go to that effort to abuse someone like Jay Beattie, who's not doing anyone any harm? To set up that profile, to post, whatever it was, these sick posts about him. I mean, for one, the guy has far too much spare time in his hands, and two, the guy's obviously, as you say, totally depraved. And I think you need to be certainly careful getting the authorities involved with, social media posts. But if it's a targeted campaign of abuse, I don't think there's any question that authorities should step in. Again, this is the first I've heard of this. I don't know what's been said or how long this has been going on, but guys like these are sick, and regardless of football or anything like that, there are unfortunately people in society who. All right, okay.
That's the guy. Now, the sad thing about that is, when I looked at that yesterday, at 58 followers, now it's got 123.
That is sad.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable.
No,
what he said, Patrick, was he was threatening. He was talking about how much he would love to physically batter wee Jay and described him in a way that hasn't been appropriate for about 100 years. So, in fact, I don't think it was ever appropriate. But that's who we're dealing with. I don't know if that guy's real or not. But as I say, you'd have some fucking neck on you. Well, actually, that's the one thing he doesn't have on him.
You're right.
He doesn't have a neck.
He's not seen his neck in some time. It's absolutely disgusting. I remember watching, maybe when I first became aware, AJ, a video that his dad did, and it was restorative justice, I think, where they got somebody who had been abusing him online to come and sit in a room with the wee fella and his dad, to say, look, these are the people you're actually affecting here. That's a really powerful tool, but these people are beyond even considering doing it. Absolutely disgusting. You're right to bring it up, Daniel, and I'm glad you did. All power to Jay, Martin, and everybody else affected by that. And Acsom are right behind you. Anything we can do, obviously. Paul, you're in on the YouTube. 7 times Jungle Lion gets his post up on Acsom. Yes, I know people have suggested that he is the main man behind Acsom. He's the sponsor, and I'm not denying it. Green Days 67, bet it's Don Robertson's for the League Cup final. The reason I bring this up, guys, we are going to be focusing on, obviously, who we start tomorrow night based on the form that players were shown at the weekend. What about Don Robertson's form, Patrick? I mean, I read somewhere that there was a couple of world records broken at the weekend in terms of possession versus fouls committed. It's almost impossible to commit the amount of fouls Celtic committed with the amount of the ball that we had. It's like we were committing a foul every 90 seconds without the ball. It's incredible.
It's pretty impressive. I'm pretty sure that we had 77% at the weekend there. We only Hibs only committed one foul against us,
In the
which is
90th
pretty
minute.
impressive. I mean, that's great discipline from Hibs. I mean, that's
yeah.
70 minutes, 72 minutes or so, and they only fouled us once.
Yeah.
That's great work off the ball. I mean, that's brilliant.
Can
And of course,
I just say this, Patrick?
Was it?
It was just a thing that came on yesterday, for clarity. 2 new world records for a top flight game were set at Celtic Park on Saturday when Celtic committed 94.4% of all fouls, despite having 78% possession. Despite having the ball for more than 3/4 of the game, the Hoops were penalised 17 times, while Hibs remarkably only committed 1 foul the whole match. Despite only having the ball for 22% of the time, no team since FIFA or UEFA records began has ever committed such a high percentage of fouls on such a high percentage of possession, and no team with lower than 30% has ever committed less than 3 fouls. These are world records, guys. You know,
Unreal.
it's proud moments.
There are gongs in SFA offices, John, for all these world records, right? There was a few, I think, right backs goals in a season, 4 years running. They were another record-breaking figure. But I tell you something, that's something that probably is a new pattern of assistance. I wouldn't mind somebody doing a deep dive on that, because it does seem as though we always have high percentage domestically, don't we, of possession. And we always give away loads of fouls. I just don't get it, guys. Any idea why that can be?
I mean, there is obviously the caveat that, you know, basically we hold on to the ball, we pass it around, we get it in the final third, and we'll either have a chance or lose it, and then they'll break and maybe we'll commit a foul and stuff like that. But that can't happen 15 times in the space of 20 minutes, you know? That's just not how it works. It's as if the opposition team know that they'll get a foul, as long as they sort of break with the ball and then go down at the first line of contact or even simulation. Don Robertson, I mean, you pointed it out there in particular. What a game he had in the Scottish Cup final. I mean, we didn't really deserve to win that game, I thought. I know we're 7 minutes away from doing so, but we didn't play all that well. But my God, he played his part in Aberdeen's victory. Apologies, I can't remember the game exactly, but we've had Don Robertson once before this season, equally terrible, and then again against Hibs. So God knows what's possessed him since May. I thought he was okay. I mean, none of the refs in Scotland are of any quality, in my opinion. Some of them are worse than others, but certainly the last 3 or 4 Celtic games he's refereed, there's been some really questionable decisions there. And as you say, whether it's pattern of assistance or whether he's just recently become extremely bad at his job, it's obviously one of the two, because a lot of the decisions he's making, are really, really questionable.
No, without a doubt. We're talking about the number 7. Obviously, the 7 questions on the open letter versus the number 7 merchandise range that launched yesterday. And Danny Boy said 7 deadly sins, and I've got them all. I had a wee look at them. So it's pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. In my old age, I think I am suffering from a few of them myself, particularly gluttony, John. It gets harder with age, which is why I had to go on the treadmill this morning. But yeah, the 7 deadly signs. I think that the board are suffering from a few of them themselves, John.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning my name immediately after gluttony. But good man.
That was mine. Much. I'm having gluttony.
Yeah. I'm sure everyone appreciates that irony. The wee skinny guy talking about it. Just throw me under a bus, why don't you? Although there'd be quite high suspension on the bus, to be fair. Yeah, no,
that was not intentional, John. That was not intentional.
I mean, look, the board. A couple of things, So I don't think there's going to be any response before the AGM, and I think what's going to happen at the AGM is what we've said. And I think the reason for that is because sacking a chairman and sacking non-execs and removing them, gets the attention of the city, and people start looking at the company again. So, best way if you're Dermot Desmond to remove these people. And by the way, the notion that Dermot Desmond doesn't know who leaked this is absolutely farcical, right? You don't get to be where Dermot Desmond is without basically an intelligence network for all intents and purposes. Guy's a multi-billionaire, right? So, if you don't think he has an intelligence network and he can pay people off to fight, it would take him 5 minutes. Imagine you can phone the guy from the Sun or a guy that works next to the guy from the Sun, fire him a good few quid and get the answer. If he wants to know the answer, he knows the answer. The only reason he wouldn't know is if he really doesn't want to. But I would suggest that, he would want to know the answer because he wants to know someone who is leaking, because he that could put his business at a competitive disadvantage if something gets leaked that he didn't want leaked. So I would say that he knows who it is, no question of that. And those people will be removed at the AGM. There won't be any response to the fans, and that's probably going to be the end of it. And they'll just be hoping, literally, as that guy I was talking about earlier on, they'll be hoping January comes round, they can spend a few quid in January, maybe get some decent players in this time, and everyone will just back off it, just let it go. Because it is very difficult persistence is one of the biggest flaws of being, a human. Essentially, it's just we let things go. In the sales, I remember an old sales trainer telling me, when you have contact with a client, the first 6 odd times, nothing will happen. 7 and 8, where the money is, and the reason the money's there is because nobody else persists that long. Mm-hmm. And persistence is a big issue, especially with that, and that's just on an individual basis. So imagine like trying to keep a unified support. Already there is, people annoyed about this particular form of protest. So if the next one, people get annoyed about that as well, then where are you? And what we're saying is we're going to keep this going until we get meaningful change. Meaningful change, I think the board are hoping will probably be removing Lowell and Brian Wilson most likely. And we'll see how that goes. I mean, I don't know, if, the Chris Mackay and Michael Nicholson, I don't know. I mean, can they get, I mean, precisely, I don't think they can get, but if they could get jobs that paid a bit less, but they were a lot less hassled, would their lives be easier? They certainly couldn't get jobs for the same amount of money. But again, and that's right across the board. If you look at an executive team, because Dermot Desmond is essentially, as I said, a dictator. Some people would say benign dictator because he's not stripping the club for parts. But it's not benign if you're micromanaging every aspect of the club. None of his other businesses he micromanages. He puts a chief executive in and essentially, leaves him alone for 6 months, meets with him twice a year. And if you have to meet with him any more than that, you're banging trouble. So why is he micromanaging Celtic? These are questions that, I don't have the answers to, but I'd like to have the answers to. I mean, why is that necessary? Now, he obviously doesn't believe Michael Nicholson's doing a bad job, otherwise he'd remove him. Mm. So why is he micromanaging him? And why are they, when it comes to transfers, why is he not allowed to, have a say? Because the board would agree the budget, right? So the board have agreed a budget for transfers along with the manager, and why are they not allowed to spend it? So I mean, I have a lot of questions, more questions than answers, but once you get into the nitty-gritty of it, there's some very confusing sort of relationships at play there. But the one thing I would say is our transfer business has been almost entirely the same way for about 13 years now, and there is only one factor there when Dermot Desmond wasn't being accused of basically micromanaging or the transfers. There was still one person there who remains there. And I believe that person, they're probably assuming that getting rid of that person again will have the, a placating effect on the fans. I reckon that's what they're working with.
The thing is, John, there's a huge element of this as fans that we need to kind of put the pieces together and then come up with our own theory behind it. And I think that's one of the best things about speaking to other people with different angles on it. So over the last few weeks, I've spoken to people who have had direct contact and dealings with the likes of Peter Lawwell and Dermot Desmond, Michael Nicholson and Chris Mackay. And, what I think having, be that in a boardroom or a business sense or from an agent's perspective, John, and from all the information that I've kind of gathered myself, I think the micromanagement comes from Peter Lawwell. I think it comes from him. And he's obviously Dermot Desmond's guy. Dermot Desmond trusts him. Someone compared it to the fact that, Brendan Rodgers is also Dermot Desmond's guy. So for those two individuals not to get on is going to be a very difficult situation for Dermot to deal with. However, Peter Lawwell for me is the guy that micromanages. And there's a culture being based on it. And I can talk about even some of the things that have happened directly to myself and some of the experiences I've had as a Celtic fan and how I've been treated. And there'll be other people in the comment section who have had similar experiences, John, where you're treated with nothing but utter contempt. And that is a culture. Now, this isn't an opportunity for me to promote this, but I think it is important to point people in the direction of a series that we are doing on the channel at the moment called Saving Our Celts. It's a 4-parter, and part 3 goes out Friday night. I'm going to bring this up for anybody who can't remember what Terry Cassidy's comb over looked like, but there you go. This was basically in December 91. This particular episode is based. What we've managed to get through nefarious means is archive footage that no one's ever seen. It's not been played before. And there was an episode just the other month when Brian Dempsey gave a great speech and Joe Beltrami was there, etc. This was in the depths of the 1990s when Jim Orr set up Save Our Celts. And this is the second rally that took place in Shettleston Halls. We've got about an hour's footage, and it's unbelievable, John, when you watch this, how much hasn't changed since 1991 in terms of culture. The club has changed massively. The stadium's changed massively. We're cash rich and all the rest of it. We're a big brand club and all this kind of stuff that we weren't back then. I mean, they were talking there about the Umbro deal that we had in 1991. Honestly, go and check it out. Check out the figures. It's eye-opening. But 3 of the big subjects that were on the table for this meeting in December 1991 was a failure to keep your best players, the poor communication from the club, and what were we going to do with the stadium. This is December 91, John. And then you fast forward to 2025, and yes, we've had loads of success, and we're very, very good at making money, etc., etc. But they 3 fundamental issues still exist at Celtic. And it's cultural. It's a cultural issue within the club that's passed down. Bizarrely enough, Terry Cassidy gave Peter Lawwell his first job at Celtic as a financial controller. So maybe Terry Cassidy would be a very interesting interviewee. I have no idea where he is these days. But tune in on Friday, because watching it back, and I've had this footage for some time, but watching it back for the editing process, I was blown away with the similarities, John, of that relationship between the club and the fans. That much has not really changed, whereby it's like, right, we'll just keep you in the shadows and you'll do what you're told, and we're not going to tell you anything more than we want to tell you. You should see Cassidy rolling his eyes at fans asking him questions and everything on the stage. It's embarrassing, right? But go and check it out. Go and check it out. And near the end of the hour, there's a very familiar face and voice who asks, I think, the final question. It's a certain Matt McGlone. And he asks the question of, Terry Cassidy, and I'm not going to spoil what the question is and all the rest of it. But basically, it sets us up to say, you know what, Save Our Celts were brilliant. They kind of set a bar. They showed that you can mobilise and challenge the board, and they inspired others to do the same. And of course, Matt was to bring together Celts for Change later on. And there is a fourth part all about Celts for Change. So
I think that's a relevant comment there from Pete McGee. The board put the cult in culture.
We know what you're getting at there, Pete. We know what you're getting at. Here we go. So we're going to bring up some of the comments before we move on. And as I say, I've got a wee video to play as well. McLaughlin P played 40 games in 2025. We've won 24 games in total. Doesn't make for great reading, that. We've also got Jose Betis, or Jose Betis, 60,000 red cards shown to the board. That has been suggested a few times, actually, Jose. I think that works well. We've also got Ronnie Glavin. I watched the video with Steve-O from Celtic World Order last night. Celtic Park definitely looking grey and tired. Love the place, but does look a bit of a tip in bits. Are we ready to have a wee watch at this, guys? Are you happy to watch this for 5 minutes? It's a wee video that Steve-O from Celtic World Order pulled together. Go and check out his channel over on YouTube. I'm just going to make sure that I've actually got the video uploaded. And let me just delete a few first, and then we'll upload that. And basically what he's done is he's taken a wander around Paradise, and he's pointed out a lot of what is wrong in relation to the aesthetics of the stadium. Now, as I've said before, we pride ourselves in this being Paradise, and you know, when you've seen it rising like a phoenix from the ashes of Parkhead again, Patrick, this was back in 95, 96 when we returned to Celtic Park. It looked tremendous. It looked absolutely incredible, but not much has been done with that area. You know, those three stands, not much has been done since. I'm trying to upload this. If I can't, then I'll just send you across to Steve-O's page on YouTube. I was trying to upload it so I could play it to you, but it's maybe too big a file. And if it isn't, I will play it before the end of the show. And in the meantime, I'll bring up some.
Well, I mean, I thought that's why you brought me on, Paul John. If you want to highlight things that are old and tired,
John, I would never suggest that of you. But we're going to do 4 specials on this as Acsom, starting next week. The first one's going to be the state of Paradise, the state of the stadium. You know, the lack of work that we've done to the stadium since the original 1995 redevelopment. We're also going to do one on recruitment. I think John, maybe a couple of seasons ago now, John, at least a year ago anyway, you ran through the amount of flops that we'd had in terms of recruitment. So we're going to do a deep dive into that. But with the solution being, you need a football department. You need a much better structure. You need a director of football, and you need something that stays there regardless of who the manager is. And we're also going to be looking at the academy. I've seen this morning Sean McCardle away to Partick Thistle. Brilliant. I hope he does well there. But we are going to be looking at just the lack of academy players that come on and actually become Celtic players. What does that even mean? We're going to be looking at that. And then obviously the board, the makeup of the board, who should and shouldn't be on the board, and their lack of communication that harks right back to the Terry Cassidy days. This video is probably going to be too big a file, so I'll look into that later on. Let's have a look at the starting 11 for tomorrow night then. It's still a European game. I'm going to start with right back, Donovan or Ralston for you, Patrick. Who gets the nod?
That's easy. Donovan for me. Fair play, Brendan giving him a rest, but obviously he's a young player. I think he's only 19. Came into the first team sort of all of a sudden. Played a few games in a row there, so give him a rest. But I think he's above Ralston in the pecking order for me. I think he's done quite well, and I don't think Ralston wasn't terrible, but I don't think he was all that good at the weekend either. So I think Donovan has to come into the side for me.
Yeah, I think he brings a lot more energy for me. Getting up and down that side. I think he brings a decent amount of pace as well. That enthusiasm that you have when you're young. So, Tony's a good player, but he's coming back from injury. Yeah, I think Ralston will get the nod, but not from me. I would go with Donovan.
Yeah, I'm the same. I would pick Kobe Donovan as well, because again, going back to the academy special that we're going to be doing in a couple of weeks, what's he done wrong to get dropped, and how are we going to develop our players and progress our players if we don't continue to show a bit of faith in them? Home European tie under the lights, get him in there to continue to learn. Kieran Tierney or Sarachi, is another one that I've put on my list here, Patrick, because I'm a massive Tierney fan. But to be honest, I was really impressed by Sirachi's performance at the weekend.
Yeah, I thought he played quite well. I think it's the same story for me. I think it's a case of he was given a rest. You know, he was it Partick Thistle, what he say? He played 90 minutes. I think he lasted most of the game over in Belgrade. Sirachi obviously comes in. And Sirachi, to be fair, I'd sort of written him off far too quickly. You know, I thought he came on at Ibrox and, you know, what a place to make your debut. I thought his first two appearances were a bit, I don't know, erratic, but I think he's been really, really solid since then. I think he looks like a really good player. I don't know if we've got an option to buy. I don't think we do. It's just a straightforward loan. Excellent planning again, of course. That's fantastic. But no, he looks a really good player. But I think Tierney will come back in. I think it was a case of giving the guy a rest. So I would go for Tierney and Donovan.
See, the thing with that as well, the 90 minutes, John, I was reading during the week, that was his first 90 minutes of football since January 2024.
Yeah, well, I actually disagree. I've been very, very disappointed with Tierney, and I don't think he's offered that much. I would go with Sirachi. You know, at no point has Tierney played this season where you're thinking he's come on and had a great game. You know, usually it's just like, yeah, no, he was fine. You know, but what did he add? I mean, some of the balls Sirachi has played, and some of the assists he's had have been, you know, really top notch. And I know people have already drawn the comparison, especially when he plays inverted. But you know, he does seem like very similar to Greg Taylor in how he plays. So there is that. I worry about the Tierney situation there, just because listening to people who know more about the injury, it's like the injury is not one which, you know, gets better with the rest. It's a wear and tear injury. So, you know, the more you play, the worse it gets, you know, so it's not that kind of, you know, sort of muscle injury where you just rest it and eventually you're all right. So, look, you know, I'm not saying. I think Kieran Tierney could potentially come on and be absolutely sensational, but he's not just now. So you know, if for today, you know, for tomorrow, he's not been playing well enough, and Sirachi has. So you know, simply on form, you have to say Sirachi.
Yeah, and sometimes I think in all the modern science and data and all the rest of it, we forget sometimes just play your best players, John. Jim Orr always says it. You know, just
guys on form. Play who's on form.
Absolutely, I agree with that. We do have our video. I'm going to play this. This is a wee look at Celtic Park and some of the concerns that we've got. And I think the point of this is we're going to cover it in more depth. There's a lot of things that we are taking to the board saying you are negligent, and this is one of them. Sit back and enjoy for the next 5 minutes.
So here we are, round at the back of the Jock Stein stand, and when you come round here, like anywhere at the stadium on a non-match day, it's not until you see it in the cold light of day, when there's not people bustling around, you start to see the decay, and you start to see how much the stadium desperately needs a wee bit of TLC, much like the way that how we are ran at board level needs a wee bit of TLC for the footballing department. As you can see above, they have still yet to replace the banners that once adorned there. And in fact, if you want to know where they are, well, there they are right there. They've been taken down and they're lying beside a couple of storage units, discarded, thrown to the side. It just shows, it's small things, but it just shows you the level of care or lack thereof that there is. It's quite embarrassing. Now, I know these are wee small, tiny details, but how long have we been saying that the stadium needs upgraded, we need to have a wee bit of pride in our home? Celtic certainly don't look like they're home proud. You know, they're failing us with the basic things such as the amenities in some of the stands is shambolic. It needs modernised, but even just a fresh lick of paint or a couple of new banners, something to make it look a wee bit rejuvenated for the new season. And here we are, now in the international break, and they still haven't even done the basics of dressing up the outside of the stadium. And as I say, I mean, this is absolute minute stuff. This is hardly the biggest concern for Celtic at this moment in time, but it just paints a picture. It's about a lack of care of the very basics of Celtic, world-class basics, as they say. You know, and when you have a wee walk around the sort of outside of the stadium, it's, and I know you'll get this at most grounds, well, maybe you won't if you get down to some of those big grounds down south, but it's a bit of a tipping ground. I mean, look at this, we've got an apparent, how long's this been here? An information station, pop-up kiosk, just thrown there, in there with all the other storage things for match days, whatever it is that they hold, just big skips everywhere. It looks like a derelict wasteland at the best of times round here. And that's the thing, you know, if the custodians of the club, those that run the club, those that are upstairs in those offices earning a fortune, if they can't do the basics, they just sort of taking care of the home ground, of the team, then how can they be trusted to take care of what needs done on the pitch? We're great at generating money, and see if you're not going to spend that money on players, if you're not going to put it out onto the pitch, then at least put a wee bit of care into your home. I mean, again, I say it is basic stuff. You've seen, Steve, what were you moaning about it? But look how tatty this is. This is the entrance to the sports bar in the Kerrydale suite, and it's falling apart. I mean, look at it. You've got signs that have got the framework missing, they're falling down, they're empty. You know, it's just a disaster. It's plastered in a way, ultra fan stickers above it. You know, this is the first thing that people see that are coming to spend their hard-earned money. This is what your people coming for a stadium tour come to see. It looks tatty, it looks tired. As I say, it just paints a picture of where we are in terms of how much we care. I mean, look at that name, the Jock Stein stand. One of the greatest Celtic men there ever was. I mean, you look at that stand, he's got his name on it. It's hardly a tribute to the man, it's actually a wee bit of a redneck. And this is the thing, you know, when we walk around the stadium, it's not until, as I say, you're here in the cold light of day when there's nobody about that you just see how tatty it is, how run down it is. It's essentially what Fergus McCann put here. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. And then we look at things like this over here. There it is, the infamous gazebo that we still have because, you know, how long's that been up? That was put up for Champions League. That was put up for the press conferences. And it's still there. Why? What do people at Celtic Park actually do on non-match days? Because it's quite frankly embarrassing that stuff like that's still sitting there. I mean, it's embarrassing the fact that we actually have to use a pop-up gazebo. That when it would be the Champions League, it's not going to be this season, but it would be the Champions League and you've got maybe some of the best players, some of the best managers in world football having to come out to a pop-up gazebo with a generator outside to make sure it's not too cold for them. Come on, it's time to start investing in this club. It's time to start doing everything better. As we said, world-class basics. It seems that we just can't even get the basics of the stadium, of everything. It's really, really poor. And again, as we bring ourselves round the front of the stadium and further round, again, we address these banners for what they are, but tatty, missing, and in some cases torn. You know, first impressions mean a lot. And look at the state of this. It's just embarrassing, and I know I'm moaning about really tiny wee things here, but it just paints a picture. Paints a picture of where the club are at. There is so little care and love put into our club at this moment in time that it's unbelievable. You know, one side we've got the Jock Stein stand, one of the greatest Celtic men ever. The Lisbon Lions stand. and then round, as we know, towards the north curve. This is hardly a fitting tribute to these people, these great Celtic men, these great players, great manager. More importantly, they're not providing for a great fan base, one of the best fan bases in the world.
Well, gents, there you go. We're talking 7 deadly sins. I'm going to say sloth has probably crept in relation to that, because it's pretty grim viewing. And see, when I look at the stadium, I just look at the potential that we've got. Well, we can't build a stadium like Tottenham Hotspur, 800 million quid, but it's all about the footprint, and we have such an illustrious history. Why not just celebrate it? Celebrate it with art, celebrate it with statues. We need to have fan zones, there can be bandstands. But in terms of just the basics, John, we're getting them all wrong, aren't we?
Well, for a start, we don't have enough staff, right? So I would suggest there's probably no one in charge of that. Whose responsibility is it?
Mm-hmm.
So it all probably comes back to Michael Nicholson. Michael Nicholson's got 1,001 things to do. So, what's he going to do? So there's probably nobody there who's actually responsible for looking at that, because if there was, you'd be coming in every day going, I better get that sorted, I better get that done. The boss will be raging, But if you are the boss and you've got your days full already, then, what are you supposed to do? I just don't think we have sufficient manpower, and that's shown there in any number of ways. I mean, the fact that those banners aren't replaced, and I just say I was incredibly proud of the banners when the ones with my dad on it, and I got loads of pictures taken with us and the family underneath it. I was very proud. I'm sure all the rest of the players that were on there and their families felt the same way. And then to replace that with bland sort of corporate branding, and then to tear that down and we'll have nothing up for I don't know how long. Your man there, sorry, I didn't catch his name on the video. Steve. He makes a very good point, and in fact, it was basically prior to this. Last week I had the banner behind me, which basically said, world class / straight out basic board, and those basics are being missed for a reason, right? Nobody is maliciously missing them. It's simply because, very much like the transfers and the football department, there isn't a system in place, there isn't a structure in place in order to deal with it. And there's no accountability, again, because nobody at Celtic's accountable for anything. I'd say probably the only person that's in Celtic that's accountable for anything is the groundsman. Do you know what I mean? So, if the pitch was rotten, he'd probably get punted. But apart from that, I'm not sure who else, is responsible for anything, because as far as communications go, marketing goes, all the rest of it, it's really, really, really poor. There's no incentive for them to change it. The business is successful. They don't want to increase costs. They don't want to increase cost base. If they can get away with it by the seat of their pants, by just, we'll get around to it eventually. And it's just that sort of attitude. Why not just put things in place to make sure that doesn't happen? To make sure, why don't you have a fan experience manager? Why don't you have someone who deals with the outside? You could be paying someone 30 grand a year to 50 grand a year. Do you know what I mean? Peanuts, absolute peanuts in comparison to, what they could achieve in terms of making things better for the fans. At least that person then could be making proposals, active proposals, with a point to the board to say, look, here's what we're suggesting. We need to do this. We need to do it by then. We need to use this company to do it. Yes or no?
Mm-hmm. The thing is, John, again, a wee plug for Friday night. Terry Cassidy's talking in 1991 about having part of the budget committed to improving the facilities at Celtic Park, and it was £500,000. I look around there and think to myself, are we even spending that every year? Because I don't see much changing. Yes, the Celtic way was the last big change at Celtic Park, but since then, nothing. And if you walk right round the park, it's a concrete graveyard. It really is. So yeah, people might think we're picking up on things for the sake of it, Patrick, but it's the wider aspect of, it's an attitudinal thing with regards to, well, we're lazy, therefore we'll just let that rot and we'll let that become a problem. And it's like any building, it's like your home. Have a pride in it, because then a million things all happen at once and they all need sorted. Just maintain it, constantly maintain it and improve it. But show a pride in it, because we've got such a history, a glorious history, that you should celebrate that all around the stadium.
Well, can I just say, sorry, Patrick, Brendan's not the man for that job then, is he? You know, he just maintain it. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, you're right. He's not a maintenance manager. Spot on, John. But I mean, we're proud of Celtic Park, you know, and I've said this before, you kind of become defensive of other people slag it off. But see, in the last couple of years, it's, you know, we can't defend it. It does look terrible and it does need a lot of work.
And, you know, let's not kid ourselves on. The Celtic way was because of the Commonwealth Games. It wasn't because of any sort of genius in the boardroom. And obviously the stadium you see, Steve-O pointed it out there, it's the stadium that Fergus McCann built 30 years ago. So none of the current custodians, and I think that's what I'm going to call them, because that's the sort of, you've seen that ridiculous clip from Only an Excuse from 1993, Jonathan Watson dressed up as Michael Kelly, saying, "Leave us alone, we're only custodians, stop criticising us, by the way, give money." So, you know, we've got the Commonwealth Games to thank for the Celtic way. I don't know what the funding was behind that, but that was certainly the reason for it being built. We've got Fergus McCann to thank for the stadium. I mean, that the banner, I didn't even realise. I don't sit at that side of the ground. I'm at the side where the banner's still up. Still ripped a bit, but it's still up. That was the storm in late January. That was 8 months ago. And still nothing. We're giving HMRC 10.5 million, and yet we can't be bothered putting a banner back up, sprucing up the stadium. I mean, parts of it are a disgrace, and the big caveat is, well, you know, if you've got a brilliant team on the park, who really cares? But the thing is, we've neglected that as well. We've neglected it for years, and so you do see these things more clearly. That gazebo is a disgrace. I cannot believe that we pride ourselves on being a Champions League club, even a Europa League club, and we have a tent to welcome all these guys. And Steve-O said there, you know, we're welcoming some of the best players and best managers in Europe into this silly little tent. I think we've got to raise our own standards here. We, as paying customers, and that's how they see us, paying customers should not be, you know, forced to deal with, you know, the lowering of standards over, you know, decades, because they simply can't be bothered spending the money. Season ticket prices have risen high enough. You know, the Henrik Larsson range, releasing it just in time for, you know, Black Friday and Christmas and all that. I'll not be buying a single item from that, regardless of how good it looks, because not only is it a rip-off, and the markup will be massive, I refuse to spend the money because they will not spend the money on the club or on the supporters. And my final point, because we're almost out of time, another one of Dermot Desmond's assets, which I guarantee he spends a lot more time and money on, Sandy Lane in Barbados. You should see their facilities and what they spend on updating it, renovating it, making sure their customers are happy. There's a lot more care and attention given to that than there is to Celtic Football Club. Now, I'm not expecting to play a 19-hole round of golf and, you know, surrounded by Simon Cowell and Rihanna and all that when I rock up to Celtic Park. But as paying customers, we need to raise our standards, and everything Steve-O pointed out there is totally right. It's not just the lack of communication. It's not just the team on the park, which has been stripped for parts over the last 2 years, or the shambolic recruitment department. The match day experience is degrading every year. It's getting a worse and worse experience, and yet we're paying a higher price for it, despite the fact they tell us they can't spend the money. So it's just another thing that builds into the anger and the frustration, and another reason why these protests are required.
Patrick started off the show brilliantly, John, and he just finished it superbly as well. Big shout out to Steve-O at Celtic World Order. Go and check out his channel. There's more of a deep dive with Paddy on the channel that went out last night. You might enjoy that as well. We're not just moaning for the sake of it. I think it's across the board. It's an attitude. It's a culture. These things have to change. And we're going to keep talking about them until they do change, of course. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. If you want to come and see us live, then we're going to be with Chris Sutton in Greenock. Love going to Greenock, guys. Love it. People in Greenock think I'm mad. I love visiting Greenock, right? There it is. And we're going to be at the Greenock CSC with Chris Sutton, who doesn't hold back. Looking forward to that at the end of this month. It's the 1st of October already. Thank you, everybody. Look at this. James, you're going to get the last word. James, manic depressives. What, do you think it's acceptable? Jimbo, do you think it's acceptable? I don't. Many others don't either. But thank you for your comment. Thanks for coming back and disagreeing with us on a daily basis. Your thoughts are welcome as well. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Thank you to Patrick and John for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.